the chemistry between Maggie and Alex is really incredible throughout the film. Did you guys, before you actually started filming, how much, or if any, did you hang out all together? I mean, how much of that, how did that happen? Is just what I'm asking.
And did you have sex?
Greetings, Starfighter! Welcome to the TCL Shining 6 Theaters. Tonight we are very proud to present the special Mad Monster 35th anniversary screening of The Last Starfighter. Directed by Nicholas Castle and starring Lance Guest, Catherine Mary Stewart, Robert Preston, and Dale Hurley. Now, before we get into tonight's screening, we're going to go ahead and have a short Q&A. I have some questions we're going to ask, and we're going to open up to you guys. So if you have a question, raise your hand up nice and high so we can see you. We'll call on you. But please give a big welcome to director Nick Castle. Alex Rogan, Lance Guest. And Maggie Gordon, Catherine Mary Stewart. Thank you all for joining us here this evening to celebrate the 30th anniversary of this fantastic film. We're going to begin with Nick and how it first came your way and what attracted you to work direct The Last Starfighter.
Hey, hi everyone. Thanks for coming out here tonight. First of all, this I had done my first movie. It was called Tag: The Assassination Game. It was shot by a great French cinematographer. And I thought, oh my God, that looks beautiful. And I thought this may be my calling card for my next movie. And I got it was shown to the people at Lorimar, and Gary Adelson, the producer, saw it. He liked it and brought me in. I read the script and had a whole bunch of ideas, and he liked that. And I didn't know what to make of it because, I wasn't someone that was necessarily into sci-fi. But I said, you know what, I'd love to give this a shot. So really, that's how it came to pass.
All right, and then Lance and Catherine, let's talk about how you became involved, what your audition process was like, because you guys actually at one point you auditioned together, correct?
Yes, that is true. That is true. What happened was that making the key here. What happened is that they did a preliminary audition in like February or something, March or something. And then they had a final audition, and it was there were 3 guys and 3 girls, and they sort of just kind of matched us up, right?
I have no memory of that.
Well, they brought in 3 guys, and I knew all the other actors, and I knew all the other actresses as well, and they just kind of matched us up.
I didn't. You were the only one I didn't know.
I was the only one I didn't know. All I remember is meeting you,
Yes.
you, and being paired up with you. I guess I really have totally blanked on who else was there. I remember the initial audition, and there was lots of like really cool actors of the day there. And then for the callback, I remember we were put together, and you and I sort of went out into the hall and kind of like talked a little bit about the script or whatever. And then we went in and dropped our bottles and auditioned together, and it just felt just very, very comfortable. I felt personally, I just felt comfortable. I wasn't nervous. I just felt comfortable with you, and I guess that was good.
It was just in a room, and I'm sure there are actors out there that know what it's like. You just go in and it's a room, there's a couple of people there, and you try to be funny or make the script sound. I mean, not that you have to make the script sound real. The script was real, but you just have to, be comfortable with it and sell it.
I seem to remember we had to do, it was this, doing the scene at the lake where we're talking, the whole lake scene. Except that I feel like we were sort of ad-libbing about sort of looking at the stars in the sky. We were literally lying on the floor in front of the director and the producers and something in this little office. That's sort of what I remember. Do you have any recollection of that whatsoever? But we were just kind of lying there, ad-libbing, and it was just comfortable. That was my memory of it.
That, I agree with her. I don't remember the line on the floor thing, but I think my audition scene was the beta, where he first finds out that there's a beta unit there, and he has to. That was the big audition scene, right?
I wasn't in that one.
No, I'm saying that was the one we did. I can't remember what our audition scene.
I think it was at the lake.
Was it
Looking at the stars. Who knows?
We're lying down.
I do. I it was a stupid office. It was like, oh, whatever.
That was the first audition, or was that?
No. That was like the second. I think.
All right.
We were brilliant.
Yes.
Is the point.
Now, the last Starfighter, of course, has distinction when being one of the earliest films to really make heavy use of CGI for a film. What were some of the challenges as a director incorporating that into a film such as this?
Well, it was more complicated than one might think in terms of how one would approach a movie these days, because at that time no one had done it. No one had tried to do a photoreal kind of visual effects through digital productions, that kind of technology for an entire movie. Yes, they've tried to do maybe a show that it could be rendered, but that it could be done scene by scene by scene was never done. So in effect, the movie was mounted and shot, the stuff that we did together before we knew if these digital effects could actually work. So that was it was limiting to the extent that we knew we wanted to create sets that would be easily rendered in when they needed to match with the visual effects. A lot of circumstances like that. So it was quite a thing. I was talking to some of the folks up front about this exact thing. There's, if you could imagine, who's going to decide to do the first one of these? No one. It turned out that the company, Digital Productions, gave a budget that worked for Lorimar. They did it at $1 million, I think. I think the entire budget of the visual effects for the movie, and that was way below what they what was offered by doing models. So they said, okay. But it took almost a year after the production of the movie to render, to make sure that we could do all these pieces. And you'll see, when you see it, you'll see the good and the bad and the baby steps of doing this kind of work. Some of it's great, I think, absolutely wonderful. Some of it, is just not as complex as what you can do today.
Yeah.
So it was quite a challenge and quite a roll of the dice for the company.
Now, Lance, what were some of the challenges acting in an environment, in a digital an environment like this?
Well, I mean, we basically had to imagine everything, because obviously we didn't see the stuff that was going on. There were bang sticks, there were those great bang sticks where, we had to react to things blowing up. Somebody was like banging these two sticks together, and there was explosions and stuff like that. So you could, the main reason is so that you could see the light off your forehead, So, but we could react to it, But you know, you just had to rely on your actor's sense of, you know, that's what you do on stage, you know, you just imagine what's happening. It's not really that hard, but, I mean, if you're acting, if you're like, whoa, but no, it's, you just imagine it. And that's, you know, kind of how it works.
Well, he didn't ask me anything. Well, I did have one, and honestly, I wasn't involved with any of the special effects really, except when you land in the end, and they had the legs of the spaceship or whatever that thing was called, and a gigantic fan blowing on us as though it was landing, which was a drag because it was very dusty. So we're like, oh, jeez. But, so, yeah, there were these legs that were built up, and the direction was to look above that as though there was some great spaceship above that. But that was the extent of pretty much, I think, of my special effects. So.
Now, the Star Car was practical, right?
Yeah.
What else aside from the Star Car? What were some of the other things that were practical on set?
The cage.
The cage.
Yeah, the cage I was in.
The cage I was in when we did the Death Blossom that moved around. That thing.
Well, the Gunstar itself, the interior of the Gunstar is what you're saying, right? The way that the fact that you were along with Greg in a practical set, but also that it rotated.
Yeah. Yes.
The other thing, let's see, what else was? Well, of course, the game. The game was produced for the movie. Not only the physical body of the game, but also the digital. You know, and those things were done specifically to the script. So in other words, there was never a real game produced for the movie, but just those particular scenes that we needed to create. Of course, everything that was done, even on that tiny level, you know, was complicated and you know and took time to do.
What about the car? You didn't go into the car. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the car was made from I think a DeLorean.
But it was like a VW chassis.
And yeah, a VW chassis, and I don't know if anyone has been following the fact that this was going to happen, but one of the Twitter feeds from France, I believe, was that someone has the car,
right.
And they're doing some work on it. Hopefully, on one of the conventions that we'll all be at in the summer, we'll have that car with us, and everyone can take a look.
Well, I heard that they painted it red. Yeah, I mean, like, why?
I don't know.
Death to the infidel!
Now, of course, one of the great things about the movie is it's perfectly cast. I mean, aside from Lance and from Catherine, you also have Dan Hurley as Griggs and Robert Preston as Centauri. You know, what was that like? What was that like working with Robert Preston?
Well, I'll let Lance talk about this because I know he had they worked together quite closely, but just having such talented talented men and women in terms of some of the secondary characters in the picture was crucial. You know, even I think we did a lot of work. Looking at and trying to get great characters for instance, the park itself, so that everyone, you know, we didn't skimp on thinking through what could be a three-dimensional character within the confines of this kind of sweet movie. So let me give the microphone to Lance in terms of the Robert Preston act.
All right. Well, I say this all the time, but you know, he was 75 years old or something.
I can't believe it. That's so old.
Yeah. But he, you know, smoked like 2 packs a day or whatever. His hair was all black. He looked like Ronald Reagan. He had like Ronald Reagan hair, and he was just a tough guy who would just do like night shoots. And I always say this, but we only got a few takes, and so, because we had to move along, and so I used to try to get him to rehearse with me all the time and run lines and make sure we got the scene perfect. And I'm sure he thought it was like, God, what is this kid? He just worries about everything. And I was like totally anal about, like, I was so OCD about getting the scenes right, and he was totally cool. Like, he wasn't a jerk at all. He was like, whatever you want, kid, you know, I'm gonna feed her. So he was really great. And you know, and of course, when I was in high school, which had only been like a few years before that, I listened to, you know, We Got Trouble Right Here, River City, Got Trouble Right. You know, it's like, I knew that whole monologue, so I sort of embodied him, you know, when I was in high school. And then to actually meet the guy was just so kind of surreal. Do you want to say something? No.
Well, I never really, I didn't work with Robert Preston, but so we were back on the Lorimar Studios for some reshoots, and he happened to be, when I arrived, he happened to be just wrapping up something that he was doing with you guys, so I got to meet him. I didn't meet him at all on set before that, and oh my gosh, he literally had this like gold sort of glow around him, and he didn't know who I was. But I think Nick actually who introduced us, and he took my hand and he kissed it. And I was just like, he may have been 75 and I was whatever, 20 something, and I was just, I love you. I was like, I'm never gonna want that. He had that charisma and that Hollywood just charm. He was a beautiful human being from my perspective.
You know, the casting of Robert Preston should, the idea for that came from the writer, Jonathan Betchel. When we were in the midst of starting to cast the movie, he said, Nick, the Music Man in Outer Space. I said, oh my God, let's go back. That's perfect. We had already written it kind of in there, and I said, okay, now we can really go to town, because then you could think of the dialogue with him in mind. So that's what happened during the course of, but it didn't happen until we started the casting. So but it was great to have the writer, which Jonathan was there the whole time, as part of the creative team.
Now, Catherine and Lance, you know, the chemistry between Maggie and Alex is really incredible throughout the film. Did you guys, before you actually started filming, how much, or if any, did you hang out all together? I mean, how did that happen? Is just what I'm asking.
And did you have sex?
But it was very wholesome, because remember we went to the soda fountain in Brentwood, the
Yes.
Cafe 50s or whatever that was. We went to like the soda fountain in Brentwood, and because we kind of lived near each other. We lived like about a quarter mile away from each other, you know, whatever, a few blocks away. And it was so fun. I mean, we literally went to the soda fountain.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I remember that. I was like, I was like, this is so much fun. And you're like, this is serious acting. We gotta dig into the characters. And I'm like, yeah, this is great. But we did not have sex. No, you know, but we really liked each other a lot.
Yeah.
And I really feel like, it was just very, like I was saying before, we really felt comfortable with each other, I think, and I think that comes across on the screen.
I think there's a, you know, like a small town aspect to this movie that you kind of have to, like I come from a small town, and you come from a big town, but it's in Canada. So it's kind of
So it's kind of, yeah, by default, it's a small town. It's not a huge town, Edmonton, it's
Yeah.
like, but yeah, I mean, we
It's
could run
not-
into each other.
Yeah, we weren't like, it's hard to explain, but there was a lot of sort of reality of our own lives that we could apply to the script, the way it was written, and it was not that difficult a transition, so I don't know, it just was, that's kind of what was in the script, so.
Yeah, and I also feel like, and this is a credit to Nick and everybody really on the set behind the camera. For me anyway, there was such a sense of camaraderie and support and comfort. I mean, It was always a joy to go to work. It was never like, oh, you know, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of tension or anything like that. It was just like a really nice feeling on the set all the time. So, which always contributes to just, I guess, a good performance or just a comfortable performance or whatever. And I just think that feeling, that general feeling comes across on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, Hollywood is, you know, can be a very intense kind of, you know, dog-eat-dog kind of world, and we didn't really feel that at all when we were making this movie.
And of course, another one of the standout parts of the film is the makeup effects. You know, in particular, Dan as Griggs. Can you talk a little about about collaborating with the makeup team on the designs of the aliens and?
Oh, yes. I mean, this gives me the opportunity to thank one of the major contributors to this movie that is, to a certain extent, the second director on the movie, Ron Cobb. If some of you know Ron, oh, good. I'm glad you know the name. He's a remarkable artist. He was not just a designer, but a collaborator on the picture. Like I said, a kind of second director. He designed all the ships. He designed all the characters. He was also not only on production, but was the designer at Digital Productions to make sure that the visual effects would work, and was always a champion of the film in the midst of a lot of controversies and a lot of conflicts. He's a guy that lives in Australia now. Unfortunately, Ron had a major stroke last year. Yeah, he's an absolutely dear and wonderful friend of mine, and every time I'm able to bring the memory of Ron and his work to another audience, I just am honored to do it. And every time I speak about him, I send word back to Robin and his son Nick, which I'm proud to say was his son's name, to tell them how his name is and his memory is still part of the audience. So everything, when it comes to that, not to say that the people that did literally the work in taking his designs to the characters weren't important, but he was the creator. He was the creator. I mean, he had all these ideas. In terms of things like, there were some rough patches. For instance, if you look at Grig, the character Grig at the end, which was one of the first things that we actually did with him, his mask is pretty stiff. And when we saw that, we said we need more flexibility in there. So the later scenes, especially with Lance and in the Gunstar and things like that, you'll see that he has more ability to express himself. So there was a lot of trial and error in there, and again, because this was done on a fairly modest budget, what you could do in pre-production and what was possible was always limited by the amount of money. So I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to do as good as we could do with these characters, and I think the whole team was remarkable in terms of pulling it off.
I'm going to go ahead and open up to the audience for some questions right here. We'll start with you, sir.
Nick, whether you're on the scoring sessions or not with Craig Saffin, what was your thoughts when you first heard the score in full symphonic? Were you just blown away?
Yeah, I don't know if you all could hear that, but it was all about the composition of the music and how I reacted to when I heard it. Well, I had worked with Craig Saffin in my first movie, and he totally made it more than it ever had the right to be from his score. He just did a remarkable job. So I pushed and pushed and pushed to get him on this movie. and luckily the producer saw saw what he had done with my first movie, and also saw his other work, and was able to put it on. So we have a very close relationship, and we still do. We're close friends. Craig Saffin is absolutely remarkable talent. He played for me. The first time I heard anything was he played for me the themes on the piano, and of course it sounded fantastic. It sounded that's perfect. We were going for something fair. We were reminiscent of what we had seen in a way from Star Wars and the space operas, but we wanted to give it our own signature. And then when I heard it with the 90-piece orchestra at the MGM soundstage where we did it, I mean, you can't imagine a young director, coming in, and Craig was the conductor. To hear the magnitude of the sound of that, it was just totally blew me away. And every time I heard it, I remember at the very end of the mix, when we were finally finishing it, and the theme was finishing, and the gun star was flying away, and when his theme comes in, I just ran up to the screen and started punching the notes that he had hit. It was just so, I said, this is going to work. This is going to work. And so much of what he did, I think, was to bring the romance of these two and the excitement of the adventure to, it was unbelievable. He's such a creative guy.
Yes.
Obviously, the fan base for this film is really passionate, and has been for a very long period of time. My question is, at what point did you guys know that you had made something really timeless? I mean, did you finish the movie and think, what, this is fantastic, this could be 35 years anniversary in Hollywood? Was there like a period of time, 10 years after the film, that you look back and said, actually, holy crap, this is still there? I mean, was there a moment that you sort of like had a light bulb?
You guys have any thoughts?
We didn't know. I mean, when the movie came out, some people saw it, some people didn't. It was kind of like, oh, okay, We had no idea that it would last this long. I mean, our other, Breakfast Club 35-year anniversary. That was like a big deal movie back then. It was like, and we're just thrilled that, people get it, and they get what we were all trying to do.
For me, sort of the realization that this affected people on some level was when I started doing some conventions and things, and people would come up and say, 35-year-old, 40-year-old men would come and say, oh my God, this had such an influence on me as a kid, and I am showing this to my kid. It's the kind of a movie that is timeless in that sense, and it's relatable, and it has such a wonderful, uplifting message that is universal and timeless, really. But at the time, no, I'm going to say, you do the movie and you're in the middle of your, burgeoning career, and you go on to the next thing, and but it's so gratifying, and I'm so grateful to have been a part of this on so many levels, which makes it even more special that you can say all these years later that this has affected people in a very specific and special way. So I'm very grateful for that, and totally unexpected to be here 35 years. Wait, but I'm only 35. I don't do the math, but never mind. I'm happy to be here.
You had your hand up.
I didn't mean to dish.
What version of the film are you showing? Blu-ray or?
It's a DCP.
Just to answer the question too, I think when it was released, we started. You get feedback from just I don't know how, but the studio would get feedback, and the initial feedback was that it was going to be a gigantic hit. And then, as the day went on and through the weekend, they went, oh, it's not okay. It's going to be okay. So I remember feeling disappointed. I remember that because the expectation turned out to be so high to begin with. So, and it wasn't until a couple of years later that I remember I was working on my next movie, and I was looking for locations in Toronto. And a friend of mine called me and said, Nick, what's really playing well on tape is The Last Starfighter. I went, what's tape? Tape. Literally, this was the beginning of these home video thing. I had no idea, and of course, that really, I think maybe many people here is that where you first saw it was on tape or on TV. So it really had the staying power, which was great, to see. And as we're saying here, 35 years later, there's still a lot of love. So we're so happy.
I have to say something. Our script supervisor is a woman named Faye, and I remember this one thing she said. Remember Faye? Faye Brenner was her name, and she and we were talking about, what do you think this is going to be? What do you think this movie is going to be? And she just looked at me and she said, I think it's a pot boiler. And I didn't know what that was. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I don't think people are going to get it initially, but I think in the long run it's going to have a lot of sort of impact. And she was a 30-year-old woman, but it was like, I didn't know how she could be so prescient, but it was like, way to go, Faye.
And I think we have time for one more before we begin the movie, so right there, sir.
So this is a question for Nick Castle. Side note, just real quick, I just want to say I've always appreciated your collaborations with John Carpenter, especially the script with is being that, certainly this movie and Tron, that was Disney, were two different studios. But being that was kind of what's, this is considered like the second big CG film sort of in history. Was there ever any conversation between the special effects team on this movie and maybe anybody, even though it was a different studio, but anybody from Tron saying, hey, you've had the most amount of experience on doing live action against CG, was there any conversation about, can you kind of point us in the right direction on stuff, or was it kind of all just in your camp of, we're just going to go ahead and do this?
As far as I know, there was no connection between the Tron artist and our team. Someone might know. It sounds like. Go ahead.
So the effects for Tron came from a company called III, Information International Incorporated, and the guys who started Digital Productions, John Whitney, Gary Demos, had been working at III, and during the whole Tron process, they kind of left on less than friendly terms, and so they went and started Digital Productions, and so they had originally been with that team. In fact, John Whitney Sr. had done some art at III, had been in Slitscan and so on. So Digital Productions was actually sort of a splinter off of III. But there wasn't a lot of friendship between the two companies for the two productions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What was it like working in Hollywood back then, in the 80s?
Wow. Well, the question was, what was it like working back in the 80s? Well, since I don't work in the 2010s, I'm not sure how to. Well, that being said, there were, right now it's basically, I don't know if it's a golden age, but it's certainly so much product going on in various mediums that there are so many ways to create. I'm jealous in a way from that. I was fortunate to be able to break into a movie into that world where there was less, in a sense, product. I hate to use that word. done. So, but I'm sure the same issues come up from then and now, which is, this is is the craziest kind of art in the world, if you call it art, or even entertainment, because it's so expensive, and it has and there's so many hands in the pie. It's a difficult one for anyone that wants to create, and I don't see that changing particularly. We were one of the first generations to come out of film school. Myself, right before me, George Lucas and Francis Coppola, to make movies in the studio system, which was pretty at that time pretty crazy. Now it's now, and I think in a good way, a lot of people have the ability to show their wares in the new digital way that they can, and create a product and their name out there in a way that's hopefully more easy. It makes it more easy, although you have much more competition, I must say.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that helps give you a sense of that, but it's what I went through. Maybe for the actors it might be different.
Well, I've noticed that way more people are involved. Like when we were younger, not a large percentage of the people that we went to high school with became actors. Like, I always feel like there was only a few people that decided to become professional actors, like, one or two out of a huge high school, and sometimes nobody, But it seems like now more people get involved in being actors. More people choose being actors because it's a less of a gypsy kind of existence. But when we were young, it was like a very, very low percentage success rate, and so it wasn't a very promising. There was no digital age. There was no YouTube stars. There were no, like, you look up famous people, and 2/3 of them are YouTube stars that are 18 years old. Who was that person? And it's strange, It's a very different world now. If that answers your question. You want to say that?
Yeah, I think that for everybody on every level in this business, there's so much more access in terms of YouTube and, I don't know, all these digital arenas that you can enter into, and it's also a lot cheaper to make movies nowadays, and so a lot of people have more access to doing that if that's what they want to do. But my experience in the 80s was just such a decade or a decade and a half of just joy and fun, but there was still a sense of sort of the old Hollywood. I mean, I feel like the things that I work on now, it's just because they can. We can make a digital movie, so let's do it. Then it felt sort of more like you had to work your way up to being in a position to make a movie, or you had to earn your stripes, and it doesn't feel so much like that anymore. But I don't know. But it was a wonderful time for me personally, and I look back. I love the big hair. I love the shoulder pads. God damn it! I love the belt. It was really a wonderful time then, and so hopefully, the people that are still in this business and creating, and they're doing it with joy and integrity and a sense of purpose and for the right reason, because that's how I felt it was back in the 80s and early 90s.
Well, I want to thank you all for being out here this evening, taking part in this Q&A and celebrating the last Starfighter on its 30th anniversary. Also, I just want to really quick give a thank you to Sean Clark as well too for helping to bring everyone here tonight. So thank you, Sean. And so we'll go ahead and get started with The Last Starfighter. Just a quick reminder, our next Mad Monster screening will be next month on March the 13th. It's going to actually be a tribute to Dick Miller. It'll be a screening of A Bucket of Blood. So that will be taking place on March 13th. Tickets are on sale. Please give a big round of applause for